All right, so here's a resume that could be a typical resume for a student searching for co-op at the University of Cincinnati. Uh, on first glance, it's got everything you really need in a resume. It's got all the right parts. It looks like a resume for the most part, and it's got good information. And so, on first glance, hey, this is not bad. But it's got a lot of mistakes in it, and I'm going to go through them one by one. These are the most typical mistakes that students generally make in formatting a resume for their search for co-op. So the first thing you want to look at is the header. So this is the header section up here, and we can see that Jack here, whose resume this is, he's got a couple things going on here that may be a little bit of an issue here in the header. First, his name is spelled out in a different font, and so the font that we're using here is Arial 12. We can see that up here, and so we definitely don't want to do anything other than Arial 12 in the entire resume, and so we're going to switch that back to Arial 12, and we're going to bold that. That's pretty good. Looks pretty good. But something else that is important in your name is it kind of looks like everything else, and so what I tend to do is make that just a little bit bigger so that way we can see that a little bit better on the resume. Over here on the other side of the header, we have the address. This is not a big thing, but we tend to spell out a lot of different things, and so spelling out Ohio, that's pretty easy. We also have a phone number here, which is the typical phone number, but not everybody lives in the Cincinnati area, so they might not know the area code. So make sure you always add the area code. And then here's a fun thing students often do is they'll put their email address in, but they don't like using their UC email because maybe they don't check it as often, and so they throw in a Gmail. In this case, a SuperDude15 is probably not the best email address to use, and so really, no matter what it is, even if it's just in this case Jack Kelly 15 at Gmail, and so it looks a lot more professional if you use your University of Cincinnati email address. And so we're going to change that to that. We're also going to eliminate this purple or blue linking in Word that Word does, hyperlinking, and so we're gonna remove that so that we don't see that, and then we're just gonna do his email address from UC. All right, and that fix up that, and that makes that really nice. And then the last thing about the header, and this isn't too terrible here, this line. A lot of people like to use a line to kind of separate the header from the rest of the resume, and I think that actually makes a nice, clean sort of look. The trouble with this line is that I can pretty much move it anywhere I want. It's what you see is what you get sort of functionality here, and so the trouble with these is if you're manipulating your resume a lot, it can get moved around, and I don't tend to like that, and so I like to have things exactly the way I want them. I also want it perfectly aligned to this section over here and this section over here, so I tend not to do drawn lines. Take that right out of there, and what I would like to do is enter in if you put 3 hyphens in and then hit return, it automatically draws a nice line right above that area, and it makes things look really clean and really neat, and you can tell here that it's perfectly aligned to that side and perfectly aligned to this side, so that looks really nice. Okay, so moving on, after the header we have typically the first section after the header is your education, but in this case Jack has decided to add an objective statement. Now objective statements, I'm not against them completely. For the most part, especially when you're searching for a co-op and using our system PAL, you don't need an objective. So I tend to recommend just kind of eliminating that altogether, because we know that your objective is to get a co-op. But here's the reason why I might use an objective. Sometimes I might use an objective if a student has a very, very thin resume, little to no work experience or any involvement, and if you can write a well-written and thoughtful objective, or even call it, instead of an objective, a professional summary or a personal statement, I think that's a great way to kind of summarize what you can bring to the table for that employer and what kind of job you might be seeking. And so if that's written as a really, really well thought out sentence, I think that's okay. But to land a job for co-op in my major, all sorts of things wrong with that statement. And in this guy's case, Jack, he's had a few jobs, and so he doesn't really need that all so much. And so we're going to just take that right out of there. No objective statements. In the education section, we want to know that what year you're going to graduate. A lot of our employers know what year you plan to, what kind of courses that you've taken based on the year that you're going to graduate. And so here, where Jack is listed 2015 to present, that's kind of misleading because it makes it look like even if they missed the present part, is 2015. It makes it sound like he actually has his degree already, and we really don't want that. So what we want to do is eliminate that altogether. And you can either do class of, or my preference would be to do something like this. Expected May 2020, which is the date of Jack's graduation. He's in the class of 2020. And so I would definitely recommend doing something like that. You could also just take off expected altogether and just leave May 2020. And then folks will understand when they read that resume that clearly it's not the year 2020 yet, and that is the expected date of your graduation. The other thing you always want to remember is no matter where, what you might think, folks obviously know where Cincinnati is, Cincinnati, Ohio, sure, but not everybody does, especially when you might be looking at jobs that are not in the Cincinnati region. And so we want to make sure, even though it's seemingly very redundant, you want to put the name of the city and the state in which you attended school. So University of Cincinnati, Cincinnati, Ohio. Again, redundant, but still pretty necessary. The other thing we want to take a look at is that your GPA is consistent in the number of decimal points that you're using. And so Jack's got a 3.247, which is a good GPA, but he's listed here, he's got this slash out of a 4.0. And so if you're going to do out of 4.0, then you can only do 3.2, right? You want to make sure that's consistent. My personal preference would be to just eliminate the out of piece and just just kind of leave that like that, so it looks nice and clean. Same thing down here, 3.47 of 4.0. If you really want to do the 4.7 part, you got to add that other 0, and then they'll be able to tell that that's pretty consistent. But again, you want to be consistent with what you've done up here, so I'm going to eliminate that. And put that here. All right, some other things that I find, Dean's List, it's a possessive, so you want to make sure you put Dean's List, and you tend to want to put the year that happened, the semester and the year that happened. Fall, Dean's List, fall 2015, and then you can certainly list them after that. The more semesters that you're on that, if that's something you like to do. Top 20% of class in your high school is totally okay. But there is a limit to the number of AP classes that you might want to list. This is not a terrible list. It lists 5 here, but you probably could easily take out English as something that an employer may not care that they have AP English. And certainly if you're AP Calculus, you don't really need AP Algebra, so you probably could leave it kind of like that, and I think that looks good. Okay, so let's move down to the experience section. Jack has worked at Briarwood Farm as someone who collects crops, I suppose. He's also worked at Applebee's, which is a restaurant. It's a fairly well-known restaurant, so that's okay. We can assume that that's a restaurant, especially since he's written server here. But this section here in general is pretty weak, and so what we'll want to do is kind of fix that up a little bit to make that a little bit easier to kind of understand. And so let's get started on some concepts here. The first thing is you want to make sure that you're checking your spelling on all the words that you have here. I greet customers enthusiastically, except that oftentimes people will misspell that, and spell check doesn't catch everything, because you can tell here costumers, or people who put costumes on other people, I suppose, is an accurately spelled word. But so just make sure that you fix that up, and so that you're checking all the words regardless of whether or not the spell check kind of caught them or not. There's another one here. We'll grab that one here. This happened a lot apparently. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the next thing we want to look at is everything that you type out in these have to be an active voice, and no first person, so no I statements. So I greet customers is no good, and so I serve meals to customers is also no good. So we want to eliminate the I stuff in this section here. Even though we're reviewing the experience section, you can kind of check the rest of the resume and make sure the rest of those are even under Math Club here. I was captain of our team. We're going to want to eliminate that as well. Okay, now that we've removed the I statements, we also want to remember that everything that we write in our resume is in past tense, even though that might be something that we're currently doing. I tend to make sure that everything is in past tense because it's just a nice way, clean way of writing a resume. So greeted customers enthusiastically, served meals to customers. At Briarwood Farm, something that Jack seemed to have done in the past as well. Fixed farm equipment, worked to collect crops. Those are both in past tense, so that's good. So we're making sure that we're always doing that. Some people tend to write in uppercase letters a lot. So greeted customers. Customers isn't a proper noun, so we don't need to capitalize those things. Neither is enthusiastically, or service, or skills, or time management. You'll notice that this Jack has listed here some skills that he's learned: customer service skills, organization, time management. This section really is to describe the work that you've done, your responsibilities, and the accomplishments that you were able to obtain while working there. Certainly learning customer service skills is important, and certainly being organized and time management, but you really need to write those in a way that describes those skills without actually telling people that you had them, because you can really say I learned anything, but without actually describing the experience, employers tend not to believe that sort of thing. Everything in a resume needs to be listed in reverse chronological order. So the thing that you're currently doing, or the thing that you have done the most recently, needs to go on top. And so the Applebee's thing is something that Jack is currently doing. So we're going to want to make sure that that is right on there on top. So another thing we want to take a look at is the description. So the things that are actually written. We want to make sure that we're using action words, so you don't say things like I did this, but you say that you greeted, right, and that you served. But beyond that, we want to make sure that we are using terms that are powerfully motivating for employers to identify with. We might add some content that might kind of describe a little bit better some of the things that we were doing. The other thing is we serve meals to customers. That's pretty obvious if you're working at Applebee's and you're a server and that's your title. But we want to be a little bit more descriptive, and sometimes throwing in metrics, numbers, and some specifics around what you were doing is a little bit better way of describing the experiences that you've had while doing this part-time job. So something like that might be good. And then the last thing that I'll say about your experience section is that you should at least have 3 bullet points for every job that you had. According to this, Jack has been working in this job for 3 years, 3+ years, and so he should have some significant experience. He might have even been promoted to a manager or some sort of training item, and so you're going to want to list those types of things. And so promoted to assistant manager or something like that. You can certainly write things like that. That's kind of how you kind of add those types of things in there. You also wanted to talk about that you're a really good sort of team player, and so we might write something like collaborate is a great word to use in these sort of situations. We might write something like this: to provide increased customer, right? Spelling it right, of course, customer satisfaction, right, or something like that. See, that's pretty nice there, and that gives a nice little description of some of the things that Jack might have done during his time at Applebee's. So the Briarwood Farm, which is probably something that Jack had done either under the table, working for his grandfather or his father or the neighbor down the road or something like that. And so he didn't have a title, so up here we have Applebee's server, Briarwood Farm we don't, and so we might do something like farm hand or something like that. Oh, of course you need to spell farm correctly, right? That's an important aspect. And fixed farm equipment, fixed is another one of those words that can be quickly changed to something a little bit more appropriate for what you did. Worked to collect crops, I think can certainly be rewritten. Think of, dig out the thesaurus and try to find some good words that that can be powerful in this sort of area. Again, trying to get up to 3 bullet points per experience. Clearly my typing skills are amazing. There we go. Some other things that not necessarily in this experience section, but we found in here. Try not to do acronyms or abbreviations. You're going to want to spell out things that people might not get at first glance. Certainly when it comes to band, probably could have guessed that it was the North Olmsted High School, which is where Jack apparently went to school. IEEE, most people in our industry are probably going to know that one, so I usually let that one slide, but you can certainly spell that one out as well if you wanted to be consistent, and I would certainly recommend that. The next section I want to look at is skills. Now, the skills section here is listed in general. You can certainly just write skills. I actually tend to prefer the more appropriate technical skills because that triggers to the employer that we're not writing things in here like leadership, customer service works well with others. While those might be things that you are skillful at, they definitely don't belong in a resume that way. Again, we talk about our leadership and customer service skills and those types of things, those soft skills we might call them, in the experience section. We write those into the descriptions. We don't just write in here, you could say anything, I'm a superhero, and people would just be like, okay, sure. So writing it down, leadership, for example, in a skill section isn't really helpful. The other thing that's not super helpful is just saying that you have computer skills. Believe it or not, I see students do that, don't do that, or mechanical skills. We can kind of understand that you'll have those things. You just need to tell us what those things are. You also don't want to lead with the things that you really should already have knowledge of, and Windows is probably one of those things. You want to lead with the things that are going to be most important for an employer to kind of know, that you know MATLAB and C++. Maybe that you not know them, but you have working knowledge of them. Some students will do sort of put some sort of qualifier on something like that, but I tend to not do that and don't recommend it. I actually just prefer just writing the languages that and putting them on there, even if you know them a little bit, and certainly putting them there, and then obviously writing them in a way that points out the things that are probably going to be most important for an employer to know about you right away, and things like that. If you wanted to put Windows, you don't need to put Windows at this point. You should know how to use Windows or OS 10 for the Mac, but you can certainly do that. You don't need to put those things, but you can certainly do that. Microsoft Office, this is another one. You don't really need to put Microsoft Office. In fact, if you're going to put PowerPoint, Excel, and Word, you probably don't need Microsoft Office. You could even say Microsoft Office Suite. At this point, you should probably know that everyone's going to put that, and that's not really going to be a big deal. But if you are lacking things on your resume and the technical, you can certainly put that, and no one would mind that. You also need to know how to spell the different things that you're putting in your section. The miss one gets misspelled a lot. It's not misspelled, it's MATLAB, but it's all caps. In terms of content for your other section, so other is an interesting sort of term here. I might not say other, I might say related experience. You could also do activities, right? You could do I prefer to do leadership and activities. Something like that, but you can certainly call this other, which is basically what it is, section anything you want. What we want to do is make sure again that everything is in reverse chronological order, right? And that's kind of the leadership and activity section, or the other section, or what have you. Okay, and finally we have the footer, and so here we have references available upon request. In this day and age, people know that you are going to have references, and they're going to be available when they ask for them. So you don't really need to leave that anymore. And so when you're searching for co-op, we tend to ask that you put your availability in the co-op or in the bottom section. You can certainly put it at the top. I actually tend to prefer it at the bottom so that they know when you are going to be co-oping, in what terms. And also sometimes it's nice to know what terms you'll be alternating on. And so we might write something like This guy's not going to be searching for co-op in the spring of 2016. So available for co-op on alternating semesters beginning fall 2016 is a pretty easy way to write that. Now that we have the content the way we want it, what we want to do is look at Jack's overall design. And he's got a few issues that we're going to want to correct. The first one and the biggest one is this hanging second page. It must have been some formatting issue that Jack had done. He hadn't paid attention to it, and now he's got a second page. And what's going to happen when he creates this as a PDF, or even if he just uploads it as Word to PAL, he's always going to have 2 pages as a resume, and employers really don't like that. It's going to be wasteful of paper, and it'll annoy them, and so let's not annoy an employer. And so let's make sure we just kind of delete that page, and we just get on 1 page here. So we eliminate that as much as possible. Students will always ask, if I have a ton of information, can I have more than 1 page? You can have as many pages as you want, but just know that employers expect you to have 1 page because typically your employer who's hiring you, who's been working in the field for 15, 20 years, also has a 1-page resume. And to suggest that you have so much stuff that you need 2 pages might turn them off. And so I tend to just recommend 1 page, but again, your resume, you do whatever you want. You need to look at alignment issues. Everything needs to be lined up perfectly in the way that you want them. Look at this line here from Jack's first name from education experience. It's perfect, and that's easy to do because it's the left-hand margin. But if we look down this line, which should also be really easy to do because it's tabbing over, it's pretty good here. But then we missed it here, and it's pretty good here. I think what Jack was trying to do was line it up to these sections here. We want to back those things up. And put them in the same line, and now that line is really nice and clean. Boom, right down the line there, right down the middle. The hardest one is going to be this line over here. Now, when we created this line break here, we were able to line this up perfectly, and you can tell that the margin is right up here, and this goes right down. So everything on this side needs to be lined up perfectly to this, and how you do that can be really challenging. So what I've done here is I've tabbed over and hit the space bar as many times as I can to get it to be real close. But look, it's not perfect, and that's not really the best way to do it because I've done that here as well, and it's not quite aligned. Right? They're not all the same. And so in Word, actually, Word makes this really easy to do. So if we eliminate the space here in Word, and we go up to our ruler, with the ruler right above the document here, and we put we click once there on the ruler with the mouse, it actually creates a tab, and we can put that tab anywhere we want. And so say we want it right here. And then when we hit tab here, it automatically aligns to that. And you'll see how it's left aligned. It's actually perfect. Every time I drag it, it goes exactly where I want it. All you do is double click that tab and you change it from being left aligned to right aligned. And then now you'll see is when I move that, it's now on the right hand side. And so if I put that right on that line, it's going to automatically put that there, and it's going to be perfect every single time. And so we can do that for all of these, and then everything will look really nice. Okay, and then I'll do the rest and show you the finished product. Okay, so here's the finished product. You can see now everything is lined up very nicely on the edges, including everything in our other leadership and activity section, as well as our experience. So everything looks really nice and clean. So sticking with this side, we want to make sure that all these pieces here that are on this side are consistent with the rest of the design of our resume. And so if we're going to bold things, we want to make sure that we bold all the things. If we don't want to bold things, we certainly don't have to, but if you're going to bold the dates that you work somewhere, you're going to want to make sure that you do that throughout the entire resume. Another thing that I see a lot in resumes in this section here, giving the end pieces, are the hyphenation. This is an M dash here, and we got one here, so that's that big hyphen. And then here we have that little one, and mostly because we have a space in between these. Now, the way that Word works is if we type this out, and then we typed it out like that, and we hit the space after that, Word automatically adjusts it to that one, and that's why people tend to not catch them. And so it doesn't really matter which one you use, just make sure that you're consistent with how you're using it. Of course, we want to make sure our dates and months are the same. So what we do is we put months June 2012 to present. If you're currently doing that job, just you put present, don't put the date January 2016, something like that. We wouldn't do that. It's this one here that we're going to want to look at, and we're going to assume that Jack was doing that from August 2011 to May 2015. And so we just want to make sure consistent months and years. Another one that gets a lot of people is the periods at the end of statements. And so oftentimes people think like, oh, I have to put a period if it sounds like a sentence: greeted customers enthusiastically and responded to requests for service. Well, this is not really a sentence because it doesn't have all the components. It's really just a statement. But even if you wrote it in as a sentence, you want to be careful with your periods. If you're going to put a period at the end of your bullet statement, that's fine. Just be consistent. Notice that I have one here, but not one here. Same thing, missing one here. You just need to be consistent. I prefer just eliminating them altogether because I don't think they look very good. And then that way we know that they're not anywhere. We even got some down here as well. The other thing we want to make sure that we're doing is we have consistent spacing. We got some space in there. That's pretty good. We got some space there. It's pretty good. Oh, well, we got a couple of space. Actually, way too much space here. So what we might do is eliminate some of that to make that a consistent sort of spacing here. And then we want to make this the same as the rest of them. So now it looks really consistent. Okay, and so after a little bit of editing, the resume is a little bit more presentable to employers, has the things that we need, and it has a consistent look that's impressive. Thanks.